Wait a second, wait a second. It's setting up for your webinar for Facebook Live. Setting up your webinar for Facebook Live still. Setting up. Setting up. And I will just see if we are. Are we? Yes, we are. Okay. So here we are. So it's 12 o'clock. So it's noon and we are live. So let's come back to Emma. So can you see me and Emma? I hope that you do. Okay, because I can't see that on the fan page that we are together. I can see myself only. So don't worry, Emma. I'll just switch off the video and we will see you only. Okay. So my first question will be that if you can please write under this live that if you can see us and hear us, and if you can see me and Emma, because Emma is more important in this live.
So, yeah. No, yeah. That's so untrue.
Yes, so yes, we have a few people, so we will just wait for the comments. So if you can see us,
hear us, everything is fine.
Yes.
Sometimes when I start doing webinars and I just think, you know, am I talking to nobody? And once I did one and Facebook was having a kind of a glitch. And what it did is it recorded everything because I could see the webcam was working. So I knew it was recording stuff, but then I didn't know where it was going. And then, you know, so I was doing kind of silly things and I was a little bit embarrassed because I didn't know if it was working properly. So I was being really silly. And then it recorded it. We started again. And then I didn't realize when it posted to the group the next day of me like, la, 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 you know.
That's why it's like, I'm just asking because I can see that Zuzana Tofalava from, yes, Zuzana said that she sees me. Okay. Okay. But can you see both of us?
Setting up.
Both of us, can you see both of? Yes, I can see. Yes. Okay, there is also the view of you. Okay, so great, because I'm talking.
Cool.
Right. So today's today's live on Facebook is going to be, of course, with Emma, not with me. So, and it's going to be in English because we have some fans that do speak English. And our webinar in 2 weeks with Emma is going to be about puppies that bite. And before we thought that we may introduce Emma to you. And I met Emma at the seminar in Vienna, thanks to Patricia Bistron and of course Rose Reeks from ISCP, that I went there and we talked about trauma over there. And I thought, wow, I love her so much.
Oh, thank you.
So the thing is that I thought that I may ask her a few questions, but before, I think that Emma, you can just say something more about yourself, because there are so many things.
I know, and it's kind of like the people in some sides of my life don't see the other sides of my life, and so they go, you do what? So, I mean, at the moment, for instance, you probably won't be able to see, but I'm knee deep in exam papers. So that's the mark scheme for this year's exam in the UK, because that's one of my roles in life is I'm an assessment manager and help manage 500,000 candidates entries for exams in the UK for 16-year-olds. And so that's a huge responsibility, which takes up most of my summer and some of my winter as well. But the other side of me is that I'm a dog behaviourist, and it comes out of a deep love. Why I became a dog behaviourist is a complete story, which I won't go into, but I work in one of France's largest shelters. So we have about 400 animals on site at any one time. Cats and dogs, and sometimes guinea pigs. So last week I was learning how to tell if a guinea pig is a boy guinea pig or a girl guinea pig. Which was interesting. So, and you learn every day. So that's my role there. So it's kind of a mixture of teaching and reading and life and learning and all of those things.
So I thought I might ask you the first question about this, France. Why did you decide to move to France?
Because I do you know, I have absolutely no idea, just no idea. At that time in my life, it made sense. So it's not the first country I've been to, and the first country I've lived in or wanted to live in. But I like the space. France has got a lot of space, and I like the space and the blue skies and the dogs and being around nature much more than I was in the UK. Plus, it rains less. Manchester is very rainy. And the last 3 places I've lived in the city, so it's time to have a bit of a break. But I'm just hoping that Brexit doesn't happen, because I like being a European citizen, and I would like to move to other countries in Europe at some point, because I'm at that point in France now where I'm kind of thinking, wow, if I stay here any longer, I might as well apply for French nationality and just be French for the rest of my days, which is not a bad thing. But I'd like to go, Italy, Spain, Portugal, further over, Romania and Bulgaria and so on, Slovakia, Slovenia. It's too much to see. But I feel very European. So France was good in that. I know they see themselves as pivotal in Europe, don't they? Why it's kind of a good place to live for that.
I suppose that people say that French is quite difficult to learn, but I saw you and I heard you speaking French, so there is no problem for you as well.
Oh, that depends. It can be very difficult. You are going to appreciate this much more, I guess, than many people. It can be very difficult to change. I got to an age in life where, when I was younger, it was easy to switch between English and French, or English and another language. And now I have to really think about, okay, I need to put my French hat on and speak French now, and that is not always easy when you've had 5 hours of meetings like we had last night.
Okay. And then you had to switch.
Yeah.
Okay, so before, when we were warming up, we were talking about how come you started doing dogs, and we were talking about cats. So how come you started being in the dog world? How did it happen?
Well, I think I started like most children in the animal world, and my grandparents had a small holding in England in the countryside, and so we had goats, we had chickens, we had rabbits, and so on, and we had dogs and cats, and it was very much the small farm. And as I grew older, I became, because I was working full time, that was the main reason. I had then just cats, so it's me and my cat, my rescue cat Basil, and we lived a very happy and peaceful life without any other intrusions for about 14 years. And then when I moved to France and kind of settled into this life, dogs kind of started hanging around me, which was nice of them. And so I think we were talking quite a lot, weren't we, about the difference between cats and dogs. And I don't know, when you come at it from that perspective, we talk all the time in dog training, don't we, about crossover trainers, that you cross over from punishment-based training into positive training. So we use that word crossover quite frequently in that context. I'm a crossover animal companion, that I crossed over from knowing cats pretty well, and how cats function, to being, dogs. Dogs made much more sense to me, I have to say. And I always, because coming back to teaching, and I didn't say this before, somebody said, why don't you teach primary school children? Because primary school children, that's like herding cats. One of them wants to go to the toilet, one of them wants to go to sleep, one of them wants to play. None of them want to do the same thing that they, at the same moment. And teaching secondary school children is like teaching a team of huskies to pull together in the same direction. And when you go all at the same direction at the same moment, you make so much progress. It's huge. It's amazing, and so on. And so for me, the teaching teenagers is much more akin to teaching dogs than teaching primary school children and cats. But it also, I think, gave me an appreciation more of natural behaviors. Like, we don't have the expectations of cats that we do of dogs. We don't some people do maybe, take cats to the town to go around the market with us, and we don't take cats to the park, and do we have cat parks where we take our cats to go and play with other cats? I don't think those things exist. So we very much respect, I think, the behaviour of cats. We were talking yesterday, for instance, at the shelter, about how we've got a population of frogs, And the cats we've got a population of 3 cats. So the cats, they regularly catch those frogs, torment the frogs, kill the frogs, and do all manner of unspeakable things. And we go, oh, well, they're cats. Could you imagine if we did that with the dogs and let them catch the cats? And people will be kind of like, what, you let a dog get hold of a cat, play with the cat, and kill the cat? And so we have all of these expectations of cats, that cats can do things and be more animal. You know, and in England particularly, there's a big movement, people who don't like cats, who think that cats are responsible for the death of very many birds. And cat lovers, including me, would kind of go, well, they're cats. What do we expect them to do? I'll put a bell around the neck or try and, you know, restrain them from killing birds and mice and stuff. But they're cats. That's what they do. Whereas with dogs, we kind of go, well, they're dogs, but we're just going to ignore all of their behaviors that they have inside them and kind of expect them to live semi-human lives, if you like, and to behave like us rather than to behave like an animal. Not that I'm saying that in any bad way, but we do have high expectations of dogs. So I think coming from the cat world gave me a different appreciation of dogs, and vice versa. You know, raising cats in foster, raising the kittens in foster, knowing what I know about how we socialize cats, how we socialize dogs, has taught me an enormous amount about how we should socialize kittens, and about the socialization periods of kittens. And also we're going to talk obviously about dogs biting, but there's a lot of cats out there who have problems with biting and clawing as well. And knowing how to raise kittens so that they keep their claws in and keep their teeth to themselves is as important as it is for dogs. So I think I'm always learning about the different connections between both cats and dogs and how they influence our understanding of the other animals there.
So also, this is what we were discussing before, that I've been right now reading a book by Mark Bekoff, Unleashing Dogs, that we don't allow dogs to be dogs, but we do allow cats to be cats. So that's the little thing.
It's true. And, you know, I'm very much a fan of Mark Bekoff and that book in particular, because I do think it's nice to see our dogs expressing themselves. And that comes with limits as well. I think it comes with moral limits, doesn't it? Like my dog's, we saw a hare this morning. My dog likes chasing hare. That's his favorite thing to do. And yet that's not very pleasant for the hare. So I have to kind of rein it in and not let him be dog all the time, just for the welfare of other animals. But I think it's nice that we're having those conversations. I think I feel very European, though, in that I think we have very different views, maybe. For instance, a very good example involving aggression. My dogs are typical rural dogs, and they'll sometimes bark at things that freak them out. That's acceptable in France. And my neighbours think my dogs are good guardians. So that's what they said. When there was a guy picking mushrooms in the woods, because we do that in France, and he pops up like a mushroom himself. Hello. And my dogs go nuts, not massively nuts, but oh my God, you shot me. And the guy didn't go, oh, your dogs are scaring me. He said that your dogs are really good guardians. Whereas in England, I think we'd be having different conversation. So I like the fact that we still have that acceptance of a dog's role in our life in Europe, which I think I sometimes feel is perhaps a little bit lost in other Western communities and cultures.
I suppose that still, like in Poland, we have more or less, like you've said, that it is right now in France, that we still understand some of the behaviors, but in the cities, some of the behaviors are not understandable, like barking.
No, absolutely.
Yes, so cities,
we try and take those dogs with us into an urban life, which is, I think, sometimes very difficult for dogs to be able to manage. I always think, for instance, I've got Flicker, who's asleep now on the couch. She's a typical dog. She likes chasing things. And I was thinking about how cars, for instance, cars have only been in dogs' lives maybe for 100 years or so. And so they've had to adapt very quickly and change that. And we ask them not to chase dangerous stuff, which may seem like enormous amount of fun to them. She caught up with a tractor the other day and got in the tractor cab with a farmer who was kind of quite amused to find himself with an elderly shepherd sitting in his car, in his tractor, and she was delighted with herself. Whereas I think that can be very difficult in the city, for instance. I think that would be a very strange behaviour for a dog to do.
So the thing is, I'm trying to control the comments. So if you are watching us, so if you have any questions, you can try to ask us the questions. But you know, I had to switch off the sound because it was with the sound, technology. So the thing is that when I met you and we were talking about traumatized dogs in Vienna, so you were talking, I was listening. So we were also talking about aggression, fear, and anxiety. But I think that my main and my beloved topic is aggression. And also you said, yes, this is my favorite topic. Yeah. And so, so we started talking about aggression, and I thought that the first thing that we started thinking about webinar was, okay, let's talk about aggression because it's quite an important issue. So why are you so into aggression? Why?
Because I think from a shelter perspective and from other perspectives, I think I was always interested in aggression. And thinking back to my university psychology dissertation, I did it about aggression in humans and about whether it's, to what extent it is inherited, to what extent it's shaped by society. Because I think it's always been something I'm interested in. But that said, I'm a lifetime sufferer of anxiety. I'm a human being. We feel anxious. So I was talking this weekend with my sister, and I was saying before, I think my sister's an amazing person. I'm so jealous of her. She's got such an amazing everything. She's pretty, she's thin, she's tall, she's beautiful, she's talented. She's an extraordinary individual. And she said, she's suffering at the moment from quite crippling anxiety that's keeping her awake. And so I think that's when I start doing webinars, and I just think, of us, isn't it? And it's so unpredictable. And I was reading also at the weekend The Pearl by John Steinbeck, and it's about a guy who finds an amazing pearl, and he thinks this pearl is the answer to his dreams, like winning the lottery. He thinks it can secure his child's future. He thinks he can secure everything for, education, health, and everything for his child, only for the pearl to become a huge burden on him, and for his child to end up dying anyway because of the pearl. And so I think that's the problem with anxiety, that it doesn't have any triggers, particularly. It may not have any triggers. It happens before the event, so it's not a physiological reaction to something, but it can become one. It doesn't have any end points. It's not reinforcing, and yet it continues. It's horribly complex, and it doesn't necessarily follow all the laws of behavior. And I like things that are smooth and easy to understand, and they have clear beginnings and clear endings and make sense. Anxiety isn't rational. It's not sensible. We can, as human beings, rationalize our anxieties and stop them. We can go to meditation classes. We can go to yoga. We can learn to control our breathing. We can be mindful. We can do all of these things to help ourselves control our anxiety. So when my sister said, my anxiety is really bad at the moment, and I said, mine is too. I had a really bad nightmare last week. And she said, right, I found an app. Here's an app that's going to, make us meditate, make us breathe better, and do breathing practices and so on. And now we feel less anxious. That's great. But how do you then teach that to a dog? And that to me is really, really hard. Whereas aggression fits more for me behavior laws. So it has like clear starting points, it has clear end points. It follows a clear behavioral pattern. I can look at it and go, Skinner. I can look at it and say, Pavlov. It makes all kinds of sense that anxiety doesn't. And it's external, generally speaking, whereas anxiety is much more internal cognitive process. And so I like the cleanness, generally speaking, of anxiety, of aggression, that it fits patterns and that there are clear criteria for success. Whereas when a client comes to me with a dog who's feeling anxious, my prognosis is not going to be as effective. I'm not going to be able to say I can make a huge, great big change in this dog's lifestyle. But at the same time, I think fear and anxiety don't lead to dogs being on the table for euthanasia, for behavioural euthanasias. So our dogs tend to live with fear and anxiety and in a chronic state perhaps sometimes. And also we can medicate those things. So you can, if you need to, although I know it's not widely practiced in Europe, there are supplements you can take. There are things that you can do. We can help our dogs overcome anxiety through all kinds of pharmacological and medical interventions, as well as holistic programs and alternative programs in complementary therapies. You can't do that with aggression. And aggression, because it's so serious, we had an incident yesterday in the shelter, which comes back to the point, I think, of why I think your webinar is so vital. It was an 8-month dog who quite severely attacked one of my very best colleagues. And whilst I know the switches, the start, the stop, the mechanisms, the way the behavior functions, that can be really, really difficult because it's so life-threatening for both sides of the event. So it can be as lethal for the dog as it is dangerous and damaging for the person. And I think that's why it's so important for me as a topic, and why I feel so passionately about it, because fear and anxiety don't lead dogs into behavioural euthanasia to the same degree that aggression will do. And so I think that's why it's such an important topic to me.
Yeah, so when we were like talking about puppies, and you said that, oh my God, this is my favorite topic about puppies. So let's choose puppies and biting and snapping. So I thought, yeah, this is going to be a really good topic. But I suppose that we are not quite aware of the problem. So, so why did we choose this topic of puppy biting?
I think because, and again, from a shelter perspective, there are really tough dogs to rehome. It's fine when a dog is 8 weeks old and still biting, and then impossible to rehome them in so very many circumstances if they're 18 weeks old, or like the dog yesterday who's 8 months old.
Oops. So we don't have Emma. Emma is here again, but
I think you might need
we can hear her, but we can't see her. But wait a second. We will see her in a second because we did it before.
Yeah, we know what we're doing now.
Yes, you are. Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, you can. Yes, I can see you. So I suppose that everybody can see you as well.
Yeah, but they can't see you. I can't see you.
It's okay.
Okay, so why puppies is because for me, from a shelter perspective, they're impossible to rehome. I can rehome a dog who's fearful. I can't rehome a dog who hasn't learned not to bite. And I also know that the prognosis for those dogs is bad. The likelihood of an adult dog learning not to bite is very limited. So that's why I think it's so important to catch them when they're puppies and the neural networks are not set in concrete yet, as it can become, I think, for some adult dogs. And I also think, thinking of my own practice as a behaviorist, there was a lot of not misinformation, but there was a lot of perceived wisdom about what you should do and how you should teach puppies, whether you can teach them bite inhibition, whether the human factor is a factor at all, whether it's important at all. There are a lot of issues that I think, when I really considered them very, very deeply, like how do you stop a puppy biting? What do you do with a puppy who is biting? How do puppies naturally stop biting? I think there was a lot of what we take to be wisdom that actually, when I held it up to scrutiny, didn't make any sense. And when I thought about it, it didn't make any sense, like how we trained it. So for me, it became an interesting topic from that perspective as well. But just thinking about that 8-month dog yesterday, I mean, we don't have his history, so I don't know, but his sister's exactly the same. So we got two, they're quite clearly siblings, and just not only from the way that they were found, but from the looks of them. What goes into making an 8-month-old dog who bites? What is it that's created that scenario? And I think that was the important thing for me about looking at bite behavior, that it doesn't naturally die, and that these behavioral consequences for human beings and for the dogs themselves can be very, very severe. So I think that's why it, for me, was puppies. Also, I see so many people failing at it, not just like the dogs that end up in our shelter, and not just my clients, but also people whose dogs are still grabbing hold of their trousers and tearing into their trousers, and going around grabbing all sorts of things that are massively and deeply inappropriate. And so I think it's what's other behaviors that are kind of annoying, like jumping up and barking and so on, can be annoying for human beings and sometimes dangerous, not in the same way, I don't think, as biting can be. So I'm interested from that perspective as well.
I suppose that the problem is also that a lot of teenagers, like 7, 8, 9 months old dogs, are given to the shelters or just given away, or in Poland, unfortunately, sometimes people just leave them somewhere in the forest.
It's exactly the same with us, and those are the ones that then become very, very difficult to manage. And the perceived wisdom, if you like, about what people think about why dogs bite is often aggression. And so quite often I've got clients who are ringing me saying, my dog's aggressive. Okay, so let's unpack that little label. What does that mean to you? And the dog's biting. But for me, there's lots of reasons why a dog might bite. So, and going back to PANCSEP and thinking about the different pathways, the different different reasons where our behavior comes from, the different neurological pathways. So a dog may bite from predation. So one of the dogs that I'll talk about on our webinar on the 6th, is it the 16th? It is the 16th.
Yeah.
I get the date. Is predatory biting. So those are the kind of bites that happen. They are the ones that happen out of the blue. They're the ones that don't follow the ladder of, we have that lovely ladder of aggression, don't we? That starts with growling and lunging and air snapping and then biting at the top. What about those dogs who seem to go from 0 to 10 and go straight in for the bite? Because quite often that can be, for me, a predatory bite, especially if it's involving a different animal. So we get that kind. I'm thinking of a Beauceron that I had in foster, FL, and he had predatory biting and would quite often bite smaller running animals, which is one concern about biting. And then we've got aggressive biting, of course, which is quite a lot of my work. Then we've got fear biting, those dogs and I think a lot of bites come from this, where a dog is cornered, where they're trapped, where they feel like they've got no way out. And then the bite comes from that situation. But we've also got bites through play, and where a dog is trying to engage with us on a playful level and doesn't realize or can't modify their behavior, where the bite is actually not related to. I like to work through PANCSEP's pathways to eliminate, the most common causes of biting. So chasing, predatory biting, aggressive biting, fearful biting, and then get to play biting. But for me, play biting is actually has led to the worst wounds and the most serious injuries for the human beings that have been involved in that, certainly in a shelter setting. And so I'm interested in that as well. What is it that leads a dog to become so over aroused that biting is hugely pleasurable and hugely reinforcing, and can be very, very severely damaging for a human being as well? So I'm interested from that perspective as well. And it's led me to think kind of differently, I think, about biting and why puppies might bite, and what we can do about those different types of biting, because I think there are different approaches we should be using with different kinds of with those different kinds of biting.
So it's like, I think that we will find out more about that during our webinar.
Yeah, this is an advert for the webinar. Come and watch the webinar and find out more.
Yeah, find out more. But the thing is that before, we can tell you that before this live, because we've been doing it for the first time, me for the first time when it comes to the platform and Facebook, and Emma probably for the first time, we were like, okay, so let's try how it's going to look like. So, it's a kind of improvisation. So I hope that we are doing quite well. And so, but the thing is that I can assure you that Emma can talk for a long time about a lot of topics. So I hope that we are going. That's why we chose probably a little topic about this behavior of biting when it comes to puppies. Especially that I'm just right now taking another puppy, but she doesn't bite that much. Yeah, but we introduced some different ways of puppy biting inhibition, and it works quite well. So I hope that we are going to meet on the 16th at 7 p.m. Central European time. So if you wish, so just write to me even in the message. But if you have any questions, so because I can see that some of you are watching, we know that it's noon, then people are at work. Lunchtime. But later we go to work, and probably other trainers. Yeah. So I think that because we don't have questions right now, only Barbara wrote to me, bring Emma back. Okay, so, and I just wrote, yes, Emma is back. Okay, don't worry, Barbara. So it's okay. So I hope to meet you on the 16th, and of course you have a blog.
I do, yes, for Wolf Likes Me, where I don't do it as regularly as I should, because I enjoy doing it, mostly because then I can refer my clients to it and say, read this, and so it kind of helps, I think, my clients understand a little bit better some of the things that are happening with their dogs. So yes, I do enjoy doing that side of things as well.
I suppose that you should write more on the blog, but the thing is that I do the same. I don't write that much.
Yeah, and also I should kind of I find myself now not changing my view, but editing my perspective a little bit. So I think there's a time as well to kind of go back through it. And that's what happened with my puppy biting, by the way, that we had all of this traditional, this is how you teach your puppy not to bite, as opposed to the other camp, which is you can't teach your puppy not to bite, they'll create this behavior themselves. And there were some aspects of puppy biting, the traditional, even the positive methods of teaching puppies not to bite, I found them lacking when I looked at them in detail. I found that I was reading about them and thinking, that doesn't sit very well with me ethically, and also maybe sometimes doesn't work. So, for instance, the getting up and the leaving, the saying "ow," things that I would have said to clients, I think, quite easily, and many I think dog trainers would do the same, and not seeing a reduction in the behaviour. And so I could see that not only were the things that we were doing not working, I could also see that they were reinforcing to the dog. And so when you've got things like saying "ow" that's reinforcing to a dog and it's actually leading to more biting, then I think we've got to ask about what's going on there and what the motivators are for that dog and what's happening there. And I think the more I've learned about aggression, the more I've learned that quite a lot of bites, quite a significant amount of bites, don't actually happen because of aggression. And so that's interesting as well to consider why puppies are biting from different ecological behaviors, like different reasons that they are still engaged in biting. And especially I think that's particularly important to me, because I'll talk quite a lot, and you'll see some videos on the day as well of my dog Heston, who's turned out to be a really good non-biter. He's got lots of other you know, very loud and lovely behaviors that tell people exactly what he thinks about them, or, you know, whether he likes them or he doesn't. But he, from being a puppy who was surrendered and found in a box at 1 day old and hand reared with his brother, and a dog who had very limited socialization, to actually see him as a wonderful dog ambassador, and to see him as a wonderful teacher of bite restraint with other puppies, I think has been really interesting for me. And so I like to see it from that perspective as well, because I do wonder how I got it so right with him in terms of his bite history, when conventional wisdom would say he would not have any bite inhibition at all. So I was interested from that perspective as well. But yeah, it's just one of those subjects that I feel hugely passionate about, and I think sometimes we're getting quite wrong in the way that we're dealing with it and helping our clients work through it. And I do think it's an obligation that we work through it, because those are the dogs who end up in shelters. And so from the dog behavior part of me, I'm kind of going, okay, this is important. And from the shelter part of me, I'm going, this is really super important, because if I can't rehome this dog, what choice do I have? So I think I see it from that point of view as well. And also, it doesn't matter. It doesn't, for me, from a shelter perspective, it doesn't matter if the dog is biting from predation, from aggression, from fear, from play. It doesn't matter. It's biting. And that is behavior that means that almost that you've got a kind of, you're stuck in the shelter. And whilst that's different from my owners, who by and large, because on my questionnaire, I always ask owners how serious the bite, how serious the behavior is, whether they would ever abandon the animal because of the behavior. And most of the owners say, you know, this behavior is very serious, but I'll live with it. Whereas that's not true for dogs in shelters. They don't have an owner who will do something about that behavior or live with it if they can't. And so that's kind of different for me, that I need to be able to send out dogs into the world from our shelter who I know are 100% reliable in the environment in which they're going to live. So that for me puts quite a lot of pressure on getting biting teaching right. Or teaching about biting and not biting.
Yeah, I think that we have a lot of a lot of topics for the next webinars. Yeah, so okay, so because I promised you that it's going to be like 15 minutes, but I knew that it's not going to be 15 minutes.
I know, because you know me, I talk and talk.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so because probably like some of you also would like to go to work, back to work after the coffee break.
Including me.
Including you. Okay, so thank you very much. So I hope to see you on the 16th with Emma, of course, really, and with some of you on the 16th. So see you then. So so I will just right now stop our live streaming, and I hope that you won't hear when we will be trying to end our live. So I hope that you enjoyed it, and see you on the 16th at our webinar. Bye.